Warm welcome to this lecture series on organizational behavior. We are on this chapter on power and leadership. I'm Dr. MP Ganesh from IIT Hyderabad. I'll quickly summarize what happened in the previous lecture. We defined what is power. We also looked at how people get power in an organizational context. In other words, what are the sources of power which help people gain power in organizations. We also looked at the importance of empowerment, which also means diversifying the power into many people's hands, and what are the advantages of empowerment in organizational context. We also looked at what will happen if power is centralized in one place or one position. So this is where we stopped in the previous lecture. In this lecture, we will talk about the negative impact or the negative aspects of power in organizations, and also to some extent the leadership related concepts. So one important negative implication of power in organization is organizational politics, especially when the power in the organization is concentrated in one place or one position. It can lead to organizational politics. When I say one place means it can be a department or it can be a particular level in the organization, usually in the top level of the organization. When I say one position, it can be a particular position, like a president or a CEO or chairman, or somebody who's the top holding that position, having too much of power. Usually in organizations, like I mentioned in the earlier lecture, power is concentrated at the top, which is usually the managers who make important decisions which can influence many people. So what will happen if power is concentrated in one place or one position? It can lead to power imbalance. When I say imbalance, some people might have more power, or one person will have more power and many people will have less power, or one department or one section will have more power, other sections will have less power. So if there is a power imbalance, people will try to acquire power, because power is not necessarily restricted to formal power or power based on authority. Power can also be based on other sources like expert power or referent power or coercive power and things like that. So people try to seek other forms of power, either through coalitions or through indirect means. So power is, like we saw in the earlier lecture, power is the ability to influence others. So people would like to have the control over what is happening around them and also over others in the workplace. Why? Because when you feel you don't have control over what is happening around you, or when you don't have control over how people impact you, you feel very insecure. So it is quite natural that people feel insecure when there is power imbalance, or when they feel they don't have enough power. So when they feel insecure, they try to get power through other sources. So that leads to organizational politics. For example, one common way in which people get or try to get power in organizations informally is through referent power. So like I said, referent power means trying to get acceptance from others, or trying to become popular in the workplace so that others will feel proud to be associated with you. So all those things are referent power. So in organizational context, people may try to do that to get acceptance from others through pleasing them or helping them, or trying to create the sense of identity which is similar to their identity, things like that. So that can lead to politics. So politics is nothing but using power, informal power, to gain personal benefits, or to get something which is important for them in the organization. Otherwise, formally you will not be able to get it, or formally getting it will be difficult. Okay, So there can be many forms of political behavior, because in workplace it is very difficult to avoid organizational politics, because like I said, power cannot be equally distributed, or even if you equally distribute, people may perceive there is less power, so it may lead to insecurity and they will try to get into organizational politics, power politics. So power politics can exhibit in different forms. And like I said earlier, it is very difficult to avoid politics in organizations, because it is quite natural for people to feel insecure and try to do something to gain more power through other informal sources. So what are the kind of political behavior people exhibit, or how will you know or when to be cautious to know there is a power politics in the organization? Power politics or organizational politics can exhibit in different forms. The first form is manipulating information. So when power politics is there in the organization, first thing which will happen is the information flow will be manipulated. So organizations, even though there are clear-cut rules and clear-cut processes which prescribe what information should go to whom, it's very easy for people at the middle to manipulate the information. So they can either tamper with the information, or they may not give the sufficient information or not give the required information to the people who are required. So especially in organizations, for decision making, information is a very important asset. So many of these information cannot be measured or recorded. We call it tacit knowledge which cannot be recorded. So these tacit knowledge, it's very easy to manipulate this tacit knowledge. If it is a written record, it's very difficult to manipulate it. But if it is something like which cannot be measured or which cannot be recorded, for example, things like your suppliers sentiments, like let's say your supplier, your major supplier doesn't make he or she will not transact during a certain day of a month. So this information. For some people, certain days are not very auspicious. So as a person who's close to the supplier, this supplier will not do business on this particular day. So this is a tacit knowledge. You cannot record this knowledge. So you can use this knowledge for your advantage, or this person has these sentiments. So these sentiments can be used for your advantage. So this kind of information, you cannot record this information. So having this kind of information can give you extra power. So when people are at this kind of positions where they have these tacit information or informal information, it becomes easy for them to manipulate that. And they don't want to share that information with everyone, because this is a very unique information which can be used for their advantage. Okay, so let's say if I share this information with my colleagues, so they will also try to do business or reach their target by influencing their supplier. If I only know this information, I can increase my number of sales, or I can negotiate with my supplier better. Whereas if I share this information, I lose this power. Okay, so manipulating power, or when power is not flowing freely in the organization, then it can lead to politics. So one important symptom is information flow. Okay, so second important symptom which can happen in organizations when there is a lot of political behavior is impression management. Impression management means people will try to put up a positive act before others. They'll try to act nice, they'll try to act very helpful, they'll try to please people at the higher levels or even at the lower levels. Okay, so very simple way of very simple way in which this exhibits an organization is being nice to the boss. Okay, you try to be very polite, you try to be very sincere, very hardworking. So all those things are impression management techniques. So in reality they may not be having those qualities, but they try to put up an act where the higher authorities or people in the powerful positions are impressed by this act. So this is impression management. Building coalition means trying to get people for their support, trying to build partnerships. So trying to build partnerships is not wrong in organizations, but doing it informally or doing it for your own benefit is wrong. So many of these behaviors in fact are not bad, but if you are doing it for the organizational welfare, it is actually good. But if you are doing it for your own sake, for your own benefit, then it becomes political behavior. Okay. So the third kind of political behavior is building coalitions, where you try to bring in people who are similar to you, or people who have similar motives, and try to bring partnership with them. For example, very common kind of coalition which happens in organizations is language or regional coalitions. People who have similar language, they try to form smaller groups. They try to help each other. They try to do favors for each other. So these things are building coalitions. Building coalitions can happen without similar identity also. For example, I will help you and you will help me. Okay. So I will try to do favors for you whenever I have an opportunity, but you have to do it for me when there is an opportunity arises, so that we both help each other. Okay. So this is building coalitions. Another important way in which political behavior happens is blaming. Okay. So very common way in which blaming happens is through gossiping. Gossiping means talking bad about someone behind their back. Okay. So you are not giving negative feedback. Negative feedback is different. Giving negative feedback is saying something about their behavior directly in their face, or giving them direct feedback. But blaming is gossiping through indirect ways. When talking bad about them, not in front of them but to others, so that a certain kind of image is created about somebody else. So usually it happens when someone is jealous of the other person. Okay. So you feel you are very powerless because the other person is trying to not share power with you, or he or she is trying to put you down. So one way to retaliate is through blaming or through gossiping. Okay. So through gossiping, what happens is there's something called character assassination, which means trying to damage their reputation. So the whole idea of gossiping is the reputation of the other person is damaged. You are creating a negative opinion about this person among all the people around them. Okay. So it will damage their reputation in long run. So that is blaming. Other way in which political behavior happens is through creating and using reciprocity, which is similar to building coalitions, where quid pro quo. I will help you, you help me. Okay. So sometimes what happens is when new joinees join the organization, there will be some people who will try to help them to a large extent, so that they will be very grateful to this person who is helping them. Okay. So many times you see some people willingly trying to help others, so that they'll create a sense of reciprocity. Reciprocity means indirectly making them feel loyal to you. Okay. So for example, like I said earlier, you're a new joinee in the organization. Somebody is like giving you information which is like very unique. They are trying to talk to you in a very supportive way. I mean, usually it can be genuine also, but sometimes people do it so that you will feel grateful to them at some point in time. Okay. So these are some forms of political behavior. But again, I want to insist that all these behaviors are not necessarily bad. They become bad only if someone uses them for their own advantage. So controlling flow of information, being nice to people, building partnerships and doing collaboration, giving negative feedback, all those things, if you do it for the organizational benefit and also directly, they are not considered to be political behavior. Okay. So how do you avoid political behavior in workplace? Because if there is more political behavior, it can create a negative work environment. When new joinees join the organization, they'll feel very miserable because they don't know which side to join. Okay, and also if you don't join a side, if you don't take a side, you will be punished indirectly. You will face consequences. And even if you take sides, there will be like unnecessary retaliation, or there will be negative work behavior which is exhibited by everyone. People will gossip, people will try to control information, people will try to pull each other, all those things. So in long run, which is not good for the organization. So how to avoid political behavior, or how to reduce political behavior in workplace? One important way is, like I said earlier, empowerment. When people feel empowered, if they feel less insecure, they will not get into political behavior. To make the processes clear cut, you make all the processes in a very prescribed manner, have documents which clearly say what has to be done, what should not be done. Third, there should be fairness. All the processes should be fair to everyone. The process should not be biased, and also processes should facilitate transparency in the organization. It should help people know what is happening around them. If the processes themselves are very biased, it will lead to more political behavior in the organization, and high levels of political behavior in the long run will lead to negative work behavior in the workplace. Okay. So we move on to the next section of this chapter, which is leadership. So how do you define leadership? Okay. So usually we define leadership as leadership is an act where you lead others. Okay. So when you say lead, what is leading? Leading is taking them to a goal, or taking followers to a path, through a path to achieve a goal. Okay. This is what we usually visualize as leadership. In very technical terms, leadership is the ability to persuade others to seek defined objectives enthusiastically. So which is similar to power. So without power, one cannot have leadership. So that is why leadership and power are connected to each other. Okay. So if you remember the definition of power, power is also similar to leadership, which is ability to control others' behavior, ability to influence others' behavior. Similar, leadership is also using this power to influence somebody's behavior, but in a positive way. So here the idea of leadership is using the power to influence others so that the objectives are achieved enthusiastically. When I say objectives in organizational context, the objectives are organizational objectives. Okay. And also, when will people enthusiastically try to work for the organizational objectives? Only when they feel achieving organizational objectives will give happiness to themselves also, or in other words, achieving organizational objectives will also help them achieve their personal objectives. So if you remember in the first chapter, when we defined organizations, we looked at how it becomes very important to align individual goals to the organizational goals. So the role of the leader is to make people understand, make employees understand, if you achieve organizational objectives, you will also achieve your own objectives. So the role of the leader is to make people understand, or make people align their own interests to organizational interests. Okay. So making people understand, see, this is a larger goal of the organization. If you achieve it, we all will benefit, we all will achieve our individual goals also. Okay. So this is a very important characteristics of the leader, where he or she makes people understand that all our goals are connected, and when we reach a larger goal, all of us will benefit. Okay. In fact, leader also, if it is a great leader, the great leader will make people transcend their own objectives, their own goals, to achieve the larger goals. If you see many of these powerful leaders, when people follow them, they are willingly sacrifice their own needs also. Why? Because the leader has created such a sense of purpose for them in the larger goal, so that people will forget their smaller individual goals. Okay. Another definition of leadership is, in organizational context, the process of influencing group towards the achievement of goals. Similarly, like I said before, making the group feel that we need to work together to achieve the goals. So here the role of the leader is to make people work together. So the earlier definition talks about aligning individual goals with larger organizational goals. The second definition talks about making people work together, okay, so that they all together achieve the larger goal. Okay. So when you say leaders, with another similar word which comes to our mind is manager. Okay. So are all managers leaders? Not necessarily. Okay. Leaders. So what is the difference? Leader and a manager. Okay. So I don't know whether I have explained it to you earlier. There are two terms which you need to understand: role and designation. Okay. Role means something which is prescribed by the society, okay, which is not clearly written down, and many times role descriptions are perceived by the individual, or the individual assume this is what I have to do in this particular role. Okay, so leader is a role, manager is a designation. When I say designation, it is a title given to you and everything is like clearly prescribed what you have to do and what you cannot do. Okay, and the power of a manager comes through formal power. On the other hand, leader is a role. Like I said, many times there are no clear-cut descriptions of what a leader should do or should not do, and many times we assume as a leader I have to do these things, okay, because this is what society expects me to do. Okay, so this is the difference, major difference between leader and manager. So for a manager, his or her major role is to maintain the status quo, but for a leader it is to develop, and the manager tries to follow the rules, but leader tries to encourage innovation and originality. Manager tries to focus on systems and structures. For a manager, it's all about, okay, I need to have a certain kind of system, structure and all those things, and in that process manager can have negative influence on people also. So what a manager does is, these are the rules and these are the structure and systems. If people don't fit in, they have to be punished. But for a leader, systems and processes are for people. If systems and processes don't fit into people's needs, or if it doesn't help people's welfare, we need to change the systems and structure. On the other hand, for a manager, people are there to make the system and structure work. If people don't suit the system and structure, they have to be thrown out. But for the leader, systems and structures should help people to be effective and it should help their welfare. If it doesn't help, you need to change the system and structure. So that's the difference, major difference between leader and the manager. So the manager, power of the manager comes through formal power, but the power of the leader comes through referent power or expert power. Manager looks at the bottom line. Bottom line means profit, immediate targets. But the leader, like I said earlier, is very original and innovative. He or she develops innovation, and he or she focuses on people. So the goal is like very, very long term. They are like visionaries. They don't worry about what will happen tomorrow. They'll worry about what will happen after 20 years, 30 years, or even 100 years. Okay. So that is where leaders, they don't accept status quo. For them, it's all about, future. So if you have to move towards future, you need to change the status quo. You cannot stay in the same place to go to the future. But on the other hand, managers, they want to maintain the status quo. They want to make everything work at that given point in time. Manager is a good soldier who follows orders, but leader is a own person. Leader many times may not, come into the boundaries of, from a manager's point of view, it's all about doing things right. This is the set of instructions given to me, I have to do it right. But from a leader's perspective, doing the right things, which means even if rules say something, if that doesn't suit people or the context, you need to do the right thing, not doing things right. Okay. But again, the question is, do you need leaders or managers? You need both. You need managers also. Why? Because many times to maintain status, you need to maintain status quo. You cannot every time change the structure. But when there is a need to change the structure, you need to change the structure. Because if you keep on changing the structure and processes, keep questioning the status quo, you cannot process in the right way. There is a price you pay for changing. Okay. On the other hand, when there is a need to change, you need to change. And to identify there is a need to change, you need leadership qualities. So for a person to be effective, he or she should be both a manager and also a leader. So both the things are important. You need to work on the right now and what is happening at this point in time. At the same time, you need to be open to look at the future and anticipate what will change and be ready to change at any given point in time. So both are important. But in long run, leaders can make a huge impact on the organization. Okay, I'll stop here. In the next lecture, we'll talk about different approaches and theories to leadership. Till then, take care.